Happy Friday, people. Happy Friday. How's everybody doing? We are doing another little story chat with myself, Sergio Paez. And I'm talking about story. I'm talking about how you get good at doing storytelling, what you need to do for visual storytelling, and just anything in general. I usually like to kind of take your questions on Friday. If you guys have anything that is on your mind, maybe just let me know how your week went. How's it going with this Corona lockdown? What are you working on right now? That would be kind of cool just to update everybody, and I'll give you my update because regardless of what's going on on the outside, I like to schedule my stuff in advance, and I already had a couple projects going. So despite what's happening with Corona, I'm still keeping busy. So that is, and regardless, you kind of want to stay busy uh, and just stay active and keep your skills sharp no matter what. So cool. Uh, hey, great shout out to, let's see, is that Luciolart? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Sorry, I'm butchering your handle on Instagram. But thanks for watching these videos. I'm getting some feedback from you guys that you're enjoying some of this stuff, and there's a lot of questions that have coming up, and I love that. I think it's great that we collaborate as a community, as a group of visual storytellers, and just a brotherhood of artists, and it was a big family that we can all learn together and progress together, because this stuff is really hard. I mean, when you start this and you get into doing your own projects, trying to tell a story, just the technique of it is really difficult. And then on top of that, you have to have a career, and you got to make ends meet, and you got to start making money, get a job, and become an adult. And this becomes challenging. So what we want to do is try and make it easier, let you guys know that this option is available. So if you want to go become an architect or a banker, there's a lot of information out there, right? There's like all kinds of stuff with schools and resources and web pages and forums and other people you can go ask. And then that's like an established business. All right, I'm going to become an engineer. Well, everybody shakes your hand. Your parents are happy, right? And then everybody smiles. Oh, that guy's an engineer. He must be really important, right? And then you go tell somebody you want to be an artist, and then oh man, oof, they start looking down. Your parents start crying, right? Your friends think you're crazy. Everybody's telling you, what you got to have a backup. Think about what you want to do. That second thing, just to have that backup. You want to have that degree. Make sure you can get a job, because that artist thing, you're good. You're talented and stuff, but you're probably not going to make it. And that's all bull, man. I'm trying to come at you and tell you, like, you can have a career at this. There's not that much resources available for us, and this is why we got to do this stuff, to let you know that you can make it, you can do this. And it is challenging, but there's hundreds, if not thousands, of artists, hundreds of thousands of artists out there in the world. Think of all the designers and creators and just within visual storytelling and then beyond, right? Because there's fashion, and just everything has to be designed and created, and that needs an artist behind it. So anyway, there's lots of opportunity for us, and it's not going away soon, and no disease is going to wipe it out. Hey, Chad, what's up, buddy? Good to see you. I was just looking at some stuff from the mentorship the other day, and it's great to reminisce a little bit about what we did. And so Chad was one of our guys that was in the mentorship group, which was a nice private group, and we all collaborated on a bunch of projects and story assignments throughout a whole year, and it was really fabulous to see the results. There's guys who really put their heart into it. And give me an update on what's going on. If anybody's is out there, has taken some of our classes, who's doing the visual story course right now, maybe the mentorship guys like you, Chad, and just to touch base and see what's happening. So I also like to see that you guys are keeping it alive and staying connected. So that's really good. Cool. So hey, let me jump in this and start answering some of the questions, because I know it's kind of what I want to be doing today, is just taking people's questions and answering them. So Lucia, I'm butchering your handle here. So Lil Cia Salt Art, I think that's how you pronounce it. I recently started a story portfolio and was wondering how many storyboards does it take to get to a pro level. 100, 1,000? That's an interesting question because there is no number when it comes to your portfolio. And the pro level, it's also pretty foggy. So it's like, let me see if I can relate this question to something else. It's like, how do you know when you're a professional basketball player, right? Is it like because you've made 1,000 shots and you can slam dunk 1,000 times, or from the 3-point line, make it 100 times or 1,000 times? There's no answer. There's no real clear definitive answer to that. The real answer to that is you have to put in the time and the hours to study, build up your skills, and there's a definite set of skills. So, and we can talk about that, and I'll hit that in a second. But I want to get to your portfolio question. So, how many storyboards? Let me answer this in two ways. So, this may not be the exact question, but how many boards do you want to put in portfolio? I'll answer that because that's a common question. There is, again, there's no set number, but here's a guide. So let me give you a guideline. In a portfolio book, which is, now they're digital, right? So you have a PDF book. You can actually have a printed out book that you put like little sleeves of printed out artwork in there, usually 8.5 by 11 size, letter format size, and you flip through it. So on each one of those pages, you probably want to have 4 to 6 panels, not more than 9. I know people like to pack in like as many panels as possible to their portfolio pages, but that's something actually you don't want to do. You want to keep them nice and large so people can observe and really read what's going on in the images that you created. So then you'd have multiple pages of those, and you probably want to have 20 or 30 pages that are filled with examples of different story exercises that you've done. This could be a work experience that you can show. So it could be like, let's say you worked on a dramatic TV series where you're going to put samples of that in there. You have an action sequence that you've done, dramatic sequence, a comedy sequence, and these are different styles of your storytelling that can show off your visual storytelling and your drawing skills, and you put that in there. Now, when you talk about getting to the pro level, how many of those drawings do you need to do to actually be a pro? Well, what actually you need to do is to show that you can handle the complicated story assignments that you're going to get in a real world assignment. So if somebody's going to ask you to do a movie or to make a commercial for some kind of product, you have to be able to take that concept and flesh it out into images. And in order to do that, you'd have to have a command of your composition, you have to have a command of your drawing skills, command of your camera angles, and unique creativity when you're telling these stories. There's also technique involved as far as like digital tools and actual physical technique with markers and pens and shading and rendering. So all of that you have to have a really big handle on, and that sounds like a lot. But really what you want to do is communicate an idea. And if you can communicate an idea very clearly, that is the goal. So now you can do that in 1 year of experience when your ideas are really clear, or you can do that in 10 or 20 years of experience. And it's taken me a long time to build up my skills till I feel confident to be able to tell a story very clearly, because I have to reduce the distractions and all of that detail down, right? So there is no set number, but I want to just say that you have to build this up so that you have enough pencil mileage, you have enough like drawing experience is what that means, so that your drawing technique is solid and good. You can draw basically almost anything really clearly, and then you can communicate an idea and put that in pictures, okay? And that's what you put in your portfolio. And if there's more questions about that, if that was a little confusing, you can clear that up. So, all right, great shout out to all these guys who are coming out, and you have a lot of questions, little sea salt art, so that's awesome. I'll get to that, and yeah, thanks Chad for your comment here. I'm glad you had a good time in the mentorship. So you're also asking, what kind of places would you recommend going to help brush up on art, fundamentals, gestures, figure drawing, etc. So fundamentals to brush up on. Well, let me take one back step real quick, and just say that what fundamentals should you be looking to improve on? So with storytelling and visual storytelling and communicating ideas, you have to have drawing skills, but you also have to understand your shot selection, your shot choices, understanding your camera work, and this is all part of the cinema language, the film language, and that includes your staging and these are some of the things. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you want to research this stuff or check us out on our storyboard art platform to like understand what we're talking about when we say staging, because that's a really deep concept. And then you have to be able to understand story structure on top of that. So there's many different things, and they're not necessarily all chunked together. This is one of the reasons why we're trying to have a resource here so you can find it, at least get a starting point for all this. Because story structure is more on the writing side, and then art skills and composition and drawing technique and Photoshop, that's all on the art side. And there's some gray area in the middle with like the film language, and you have to all kind of put that together, and that's where you become a story artist. And then there's the creativity factor and just your originality factor. But let me see if I can give you some resources to brush up on your art skills. So now, especially, we're going to be talking about online stuff. I love bodiesinmotion.photo. Check out that website. There are others that are similar to that, but I just like the interface, and I think the models are great, the poses are great. And this is where you can do your figure drawing, your gesture drawing. There's even a really cool feature on that online platform where you can set the time limit for the poses, and it presents you with another pose, and then you sit there almost like a figure drawing session. So that's one way to keep on your life drawing skills even when you're not going outside. The other thing that I really like to do is like go do cafe sketches. You can still do that nowadays, right? People are on lockdown, but you have to go outside and get some fresh air and get some like vitamin D from the sun, right? So can you walk around your neighborhood and sketch like, wherever you live? Do you live in a city? So you're going to sketch some buildings in your street corner, or do you live in like a neighborhood, a suburb, and there's like houses and trees and that kind of stuff? Wherever you are, just go out, sketch 5 minutes, sketch 10 minutes. Can you do that? That's going to build up your drawing skills, and it doesn't take much. The other thing that I think is a really good resource is people that you live with, family members, pets, even kids, and especially, I mean, those should really inspire you to get gestures from your kids, from your pets. Those are really cool, and then also they'll help you when you start like doing stories based on either kids or quadrupedal animals like a dog or a cat, anything like that. So those are free references that you should be able to have and use. And if you have somebody that's willing to pose for you, well, have them sit down and pose, do a portrait. If they're willing to do like, sometimes they're not going to sit there for hours. Most of the time, if they're not a pro model, but can they sit and do like an hour portrait pose? Can they do gestures for 10 minutes? Maybe you can watch them as they like do yoga or something, and you can do those poses, right? I used to go to the playground and watch like kids playing baseball and soccer and stuff, and I would sketch. And then in college we would go to the zoo, and then we'd also go to study kids. We would go to daycare center, and we did a couple of those trips as a group, and that was really, really fun. And you really focus on kids. And at the time, I wasn't around very many kids, so that's really cool to learn that stuff. Anyway, those are some of those things for the fundamentals. And then obviously you can go to like the resources like YouTube and certainly our platform and everything else in between. But I would actually pick out certain people that you like and that you follow and figure out what they're looking at. Okay, so what movies are these guys watching that you admire? These could be story artists that are working at the studios like Pixar and Netflix and Disney, or they could be filmmakers like live action people like Spielberg and Scorsese and Tarantino and these guys that you follow. You can also look at what their influences are in everything: music, visual stuff, film, whatever inspires them. You can do that and keep it cool. All right, hey, good to see you, Kumar. All right, buddy. Let us know what you're working on too, because I know there's probably a lot of activity all over the globe for that stuff. Okay, so a follow-up question from Little Sea Salt Art here: is it helpful to write as a storyboard artist? Should I try and write a pilot? I always think writing is a very valid exercise just in general for everybody. And as a story artist, I also think you should probably have really good English skills, really good communication skills. That's just like general office stuff to be able to draft an email professionally and all that good stuff, and an inter-office memo and those kinds of things. But it's especially needed when you want to write for a story. So you should have a really good command of your grammar and your prose. And so that's where you want to read fiction and read some heavyweight authors. So you learn how they're doing it, how they set up loops in the written way. So literature, I think it's a great exercise. Now, does it mean you're going to become a writer? Maybe not, but then you're also when you think of writing, you're conceptualizing ideas, and then us as story artists, we put that on paper, and or digital means as well, right? Digital canvas nowadays too. But we're creating a picture of those ideas in sequential form, so one after the other, like a comic strip. And then this essentially gets made into a movie, right, or a film or a narrative project. Writers do the same thing, but their tools are the written word, and you always have to start back and forth with that. So yeah, I think it's a great exercise. Now, I wouldn't let it take you over as far as the writing is concerned if you're going to do something for yourself, because if the end product is going to be images and something like an animation or a short film, then you should probably get to that as fast as possible. And the reason you would want to write out a full script most of the time is to show it to others, or you have actors, you have other people you need to incorporate into your group. If it's just a solo project, you can kind of skip that and do it on your own. So, but yes, I think that's a really good, really good idea. So, in the books I recommend on screenwriting, there's a couple of standards that are great recommendations all around. So it's not just me recommending this stuff, but a lot of people in the industry like this. Is Story by Robert McKee. In fact, I should turn around. There's a lot on my bookshelf. So Story by Robert McKee. I really am recommending recently Save the Cat, because I love the simplistic format of that. Another guy recommended, a friend of mine, collaborator, recommended the 15-minute movie method. I haven't read that one, but I'll check that out. There's also Sid Field's book on screenwriting. That's a really well-known book. I like one that's a kind of a little bit obscure, but I think it's great. Is On Directing Film by David Mamet, who's a famous playwright and also filmmaker. He's directed a number of films, and he has it's basically, they published a talk he did at, I think it was Columbia University, and how his approach to directing films is. And it's a really nice condensed, there's some really good nuggets in there on that. And it's an easy, fast read, so you should check that out. Cool. One thing to think about with writing versus story art and storyboarding and story creation, there's a lot of overlap. And just as it takes a long time to become a good writer, it takes just as long to become a really good established draftsman and artist with the tools of drawing. Because you have to master your perspective, your anatomy, your proportions, your technique. You know, how hard to push on your paper, on your pen, on your digital setup. And that like hand-eye coordination, that skill is a mental discipline that needs to be learned over many, many years and refined over many, many years. So think about when you first started drawing as a kid, you might have had some raw talent, but over the years, the more you applied yourself, I think those of you who have stuck with it, you can see that you get better. Practice makes perfect, right? So with that, you can do, how do I want to say this? It is very difficult to master writing, and it is very difficult to master art. What you might want to do is pick one, and then give it your all for a certain period of time, maybe a couple months, a couple years. Focus on that, and then if you have other interests, and as time permits, you can branch onto other things. So I know really great writers who are also really great story artists and draftsmen and visual artists in general, just as you might know a really amazing musician who's also an awesome, basketball player, right? So it's not mutually exclusive. You can have multiple skills, or somebody's a really good cook, but then is also like a really amazing musician, right? You can do multiple things as a human being. So hopefully, it's just expanding our mind. We want to be growing as artists, right? So Distract, let me answer your question here. How do you feel about having skills in putting your storyboards into an animatic form? I think that's great. Animatics are a total trend that's here to stay for storytelling and storyboards in general. You're gonna see, in fact, if you haven't seen already, most of you guys, I see a lot of stuff being tossed around Facebook and posts everywhere. is the stuff that gets published on the recent animated TV shows, and a lot of guys are publishing their animatics and sharing that online once the project comes out, and you can see how involved and elaborate those things are, and they're getting much more detailed and like almost pseudo animated. So yeah, I would definitely apply your skills to do an animatic form. One good thing about if you edit your own animatics, you start to learn timing, and you start to make decisions that are beyond what we used to do as story artists. Like we used to just have the paper and the one panel. You do one panel, you go on to the next, and you go on to the next, and you're just doing with single panels. And they might relate one to the other. But nowadays, if you put this into an animatic, you're dealing with time. And you can also put audio and music and dialogue. And then basically what you're doing is a mini film. And then you become a filmmaker. You're making decisions as a filmmaker and as a director. And that's what I say many times. As a story artist, you are a mini director. And you need to take ownership of your sequence and your scene and see it all the way through and understand all of the elements that are necessary to complete that sequence as a story artist. And in that sense, you are directing that scene, right? Which is another reason why being a story artist leads to many times to directing your own projects or being asked to participate in projects and direct those with another team. I've been fortunate enough to have those experiences, and that's been great. So I enjoy doing it all. I love conceptualizing the sequences and also understanding the bigger picture of the story, so that you take ownership of what's going on and you see the character arcs all the way through, right? Yeah. So just a follow up on Little Sea Salt here is she's saying that you have a strong writing skills, but lacking in art. Will that hold me back? Well, as a story artist, the real answer is yes. You have to have really strong drawing skills to be a visual storyteller and a story artist professionally. Okay. What that means is, so what that means is you have to understand the art part, and the drawing part is to communicate your ideas. And if you haven't mastered that element, it's going to be much more difficult for you to communicate those ideas. So you might have really great concepts and really great ideas, but if your drawing skills aren't strong as a professional at the professional level, you're going to have a really hard time getting jobs. So that's one of the reasons that we train people at Storyboard Art into bettering their drawings. We want people to have really solid drawings. I talk a lot about anatomy and perspective and composition and depth, all of those things to make make your images really good. And it takes many years to build that up. So keep drawing. That's one thing I can say is like I have sketchbooks all over the place, and I was looking at these the other day, and it's kind of fun to see what I was doing back here. I'll see if I can hold this up a little bit better to the camera. Just I jot notes down. This one was on a mountain range that I was so I'm doodling, I'm drawing as much as possible, and not everyone's a winner, but whatever. If this is just for me, I'm not showing anybody. It's not a competition. And then eventually you get one you like, and then you can post it or you can share it with people. So that's something that you want to do. Okay. But yeah, you definitely need really good drawing skills. Cool. Let me get to Kumar here in Facebook. Thanks, buddy. So when reading a script, I start visualizing bits and shots, but they might not be appropriate, and get stuck to those. It's hard to imagine alternative camera angles. How to improve on this? So that's a really good comment. I always say a couple of things come to mind when I'm doing that stuff. Is as you're doing a project, ideas will pop into your mind, right? And you do a sequence, and based on your own personal experience or the types of movies that you like, you have a certain style, and you lean toward a couple of shot choices, let's say. So I call those, let's say, choice A in your head. But there's also choice B, C, D, and E, right? And those are multiple choices that you can do for the same exact shots in the same exact sequence. So what I do is I do an extensive series of thumbnails for a particular sequence, and I'll work out each of the different branching beats with those choices in mind. So I'll do it I'll go one pass, and that's like my first thing that pops into my head, choice A, right? But then I'll look at that sequence again, and I'll think about how can I make this different, just to try it. So I'm just experimenting here, and these are really small drawings that I can do really quickly and throw away, and nobody else has to see it. And that way I'll try options B, C, and D. And then out of those, I'll pick one that I feel is the best. And I'll look at them and go, oh, you know what? Actually, that option A was pretty bland. It was pretty boring. This B, C, and D, I'm actually pushing the angles a little bit more, and I'm going to pick this one here. And you start shuffling these things around, and then hopefully what you create is your most unique and exciting presentation for that sequence. And that takes it takes some introspection, and it takes some real like self-editing when it comes to doing this stuff. So so after a while, what happens is you build up like certain instincts. And so oftentimes you can, especially when you're in a rush on a project and there's a deadline, you can start making these types of decisions faster, and you draw them a little bit faster. But yeah, I would highly recommend, and this is one thing I tell everybody, is like push it. Just push your sequence beyond what you think is acceptable, and probably by exaggerating this thing in a really wild and crazy way, a lot like more exaggerated than you actually think, you're probably like halfway there. You know what I'm saying? And basically what it is, you're forcing yourself to really, really push it. And if it goes way crazy, like I've seen some artists, like they just go off the deep end and it's so wacky, some of the things that they come up with, then you can pull it back a little bit and then you can start toning it down. But most of the time, the tendency for artists is to be really ultra conservative with their shots. And that becomes really boring. So you do want to create something really unique. So so try that out and see if that helps, right? Cool. Let me pull up another question here from Art of Selfio. My question is that is it possible to work from home because there aren't many storyboard jobs in my area in Atlanta, Georgia? Most of the jobs I find abroad are like in California, and I can't afford to travel. That's a great question, and thanks for that. So yeah, the answer is yes, that you can work from home. It is possible to do freelance, especially now. Think about the opportunities that are going to come up because of this COVID-19 lockdown, that people are going to accept more than they have before, people working remotely. And especially artists, we've kind of, freelancers and stuff, we can gear ourselves to do that. And with a solid internet connection, just beaming images to people, and they're 2D images most of the time, so they're pretty lightweight. Dropbox is a great tool that you can use. So it's easy to have a setup and do it. But the hard part is your network. You have to have a network of people that are going to call you, going to rely on you, and like a network of clients and also friends that are actually recommend your services to people, so that you stay busy while you're at home, or you have a studio that's not connected to California, New York, London, any of these places that are major film centers. And so yes, it is possible. Now check it out. You mentioned Atlanta, Georgia. What I know of Georgia is that there's a really good live action film industry, and they're shooting a lot of films in Georgia, right? Maybe not at the moment because of the lockdown, but you want to find out who's working in Georgia, right? And who there is a filmmaker or a director or an artist that needs your services, and see if you can find them on the internet, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Instagram. Follow the people that are in your town, and then hit them up. Actually show them your portfolio. You might send them a direct message and you say, hey, I really like your work. Here, check out some of my stuff. If there's ever an opportunity to collaborate, I would love to chat. We can have coffee, something like that. You leave it open-ended, and then you start soliciting these people so that you start building up your network where you live more and more, right? I gave some advice to another guy back. This is when we were doing the mentorship, and he was overseas in Europe, and he mentioned something similar, that he was in a town that had a small film industry, but it wasn't very significant, and there wasn't much animation and projects going on, and that's pretty common for places outside of the major film centers, right? So my advice to him actually was, you can spin that around and make that an advantage, because if you own that and you are connected enough to the people in let's say your town, your city, or your local area, and it's not LA and it's not New York, what you want to do is own that and make sure that you are the go-to guy when it comes to doing stories or illustration or concepts or whatever it is that you're doing. And they're going to come to you to get the services, right? And then you can build that out. Like, how about starting a meetup group in your town that doesn't have one, right? So anybody that comes visiting that's from out of town that might be an illustrator, an artist, you invite them. You say, hey, you're coming. Well, I'm the owner of the story artist group in X town, you know, and then you start a group. You could have a drawing group, anything like that. So these are opportunities. You kind of have to think outside the box when you're not in these major centers that all of those things I'm telling you have already been set up. It's easy to go join a figure drawing group in LA. It's really easy to do that in San Francisco and New York and probably Chicago and these major metropolitan centers, because there's established artists there already. But can you do this in your small rural town? Maybe you'd have like a radius of 50 miles or so where you can collect people from the local towns or colleges or just anybody who's interested in that stuff, and you start a film group, right? Just start small, but then you build it up there. And then the other thing is you can take advantage and do this online. So that's a really great thing to do. Yes, it's possible. It is not exactly easy, but with the internet and the tools out there, it is much easier and much more accessible than it has been before. I would say you got to start with having really strong skills and a strong portfolio, and then build up your network from there, right? Cool. There's some great conversation going on in the Facebook. So I love it. You guys are awesome. And we'll just take a couple more minutes and I'll see if we can get to a couple more questions here. And then we'll bounce out for the week. So I hope you guys have been productive a little bit. It's been a little bit up and down for me as far as like staying productive, but you should always try and make an opportunity to draw. And you could do something even like right about when you're about to go to bed. Just have a sketchbook right by your side, and you doodle something. Maybe you're at dinner time, your dinner table, and you have like just a page, a sheet of paper, and you're moving your hand, right? And then you just create a doodle while you're talking to whoever else that you're having dinner with, right? So this is great. Let me just scroll down here and answer a couple. Let me see if I can like aggregate some of these questions, because there's a lot of conversation on here, and a lot of it is basically what you're doing as an artist and how you're handling the material as a story guy. So let me see if I can sum this up quickly, and then we'll end on this one. Is that there are many aspects to doing visual storytelling, right? So you guys are asking about thumbnails and how do you start your script work, and if you're writing, and what kinds of things to study. So when I was coming up, I had to really rationalize the pillars of what I needed to accomplish on the day-to-day basis, because I was working at the time. So I'm not talking about when I was in school. When I was actually a working artist, I started as an animator, and then I moved on into story. But it was difficult because not only I had to still work on my drawing skills, I also had to understand the film language and the storytelling part. And I broke it down with the help of many others, right? It wasn't me coming up with these concepts. It was other people showing me that these concepts existed, and I was trying to study them. So composition is one of them, right? Just remember that term, right? If you don't know what that means, look it up and see how you can have really interesting composition. And there's an idea of balance and weight and design inside of your composition, inside of your frame, okay? So if you don't understand what I'm talking about with what I just said, you need to study that and look it up. So look up how to have interesting and good design. So is it symmetrical? Is it asymmetrical in your composition? To get depth, are things bigger and smaller, right? Are objects bigger versus smaller objects in your composition, right? So you want to have a nice variety of shapes in your composition to create it interesting, okay? Then that will lead you to perspective, right? Perspective is a drawing technique that you need to understand and master. So again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to study this. This is another pillar of visual language and communication, to understand your perspective and know what you're doing there. The same thing goes if you're a 3D artist. You need to understand where your camera height is, which is your perspective, and what kind of camera lens you are using. That's another film language trope, and understanding that piece, okay? So composition, perspective, and then the drawing skills, which I'll bundle up into one. Let's call that just art skills in general. So we're talking about gesture drawing, anatomy, proportion, design, rendering, all of that, like physicality in the drawing and creation of the image in your head. So you have to have knowledge of shapes and things like, what a landscape looks like, what a tree looks like versus a bear versus a rhinoceros, right? All of these things you have to study, okay? And that's the art skills part of it. And then you get into the story structure, right? And this is what we talked about a little bit before. Story structure, and then the understanding of what the pillars of storytelling are, which is where the writing part is, and some of the books that we mentioned, that you can check those out. And that's another pillar, right? The structure part and the writing part. And then you have to understand that there's a personal style and application of all of these techniques. All right. This is what I wrote in my book when I wrote this stuff, that it's like putting all of these ingredients together and you bake like a bread, right? A loaf of bread, and it's just putting everything together. And when you create this combination of materials and study topics, you create your art and you create your style, you create your statement, and that's where the creativity comes in. You have to make everything else secondary. You have to make everything else almost as if it is like a reflex, that it's so natural that you don't think about it. It's like the same thing, the analogies I use in driving a car or riding a bike or tying your shoelaces, right? You've done it so many times that you don't have to think about it anymore. The same thing happens with your drawing and your story structure and your film language. You have that so tight and you understand that so well that you don't have to think about it anymore. And then what you focus on, what your thinking process is, and your problem solving is worrying about how to make the story interesting. Okay? And you're using all of these tools to make your story interesting. That's what they pay you for. They pay you to solve story problems. They pay you to solve visual problems. But you need all of these tools in order to get there. Okay? And I say this as if story artist or a visual storyteller is like the end all be all. There are many, many different disciplines within this, right? So you could be the same thing goes for an animator, a 3D artist, a cinematographer who has to understand lenses and cameras and moving things in front of them, and cranes and all kinds of like technical things. Think of an auto mechanic, right? How many parts and wrenches and tools and all of that they have to deal with on a daily basis is so complicated. But as human beings, we can do this. And for story artists, we have a certain set of tools and complications of our own, but we can make it work if we put it together. And then you take it to that high level. And what you do is you create magic, my friends. You create magic. It is really, really amazing when you put all this stuff together and you get that emotional beat of the stories that you're telling. And that's really, really good. Okay, that's the sweet spot where you want to be on when you put all these things together. Okay, so hopefully that makes some sense and inspires you guys to study some of these things. And anyway, I think on that one we'll end this. And thank you guys for your questions. And we'll start doing more of these story chats for next week. So we'll pick it up next week, and let us know what questions you have. Hit us up, direct message us, share us. It's all a big help. And then also share with each other. Share your stuff, build up your network, make sure you guys are connecting and doing all that good stuff. All right. Happy Friday. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. We'll talk soon. See you guys.